In the heart of southern Africa once stood a nation known as Rhodesia. This territory, rich in natural resources and cultural diversity, embarked on a unique and controversial path in the mid-20th century. In 1965, under the leadership of Prime Minister Ian Smith, Rhodesia declared itself sovereign, issuing a unilateral declaration of independence from Britain. This audacious move was a defiance of the post-colonial wave sweeping through Africa, and it marked Rhodesia as an international pariah. The United Nations, refusing to recognize this self-proclaimed independence, imposed economic sanctions, plunging Rhodesia into isolation. The government of this renegade nation was dominated by a white minority, a stark contrast to the majority black African population. The economic system of the time reflected this division, with wealth and resources heavily skewed towards the white community. This imbalance was a legacy of colonial rule, and it perpetuated a deep-seated racial divide within the nation. Underneath the surface of this seemingly prosperous nation simmered a cauldron of racial tension and political unrest. The white minority government implemented policies of racial segregation similar to apartheid in neighboring South Africa. Black Africans were marginalized, their voices suppressed, and their opportunities limited. This systemic discrimination sparked resentment and fueled the fires of resistance. As the decade turned, so too did the political climate. The voices of the marginalized began to grow louder, their calls for equality and democracy impossible to ignore. The slow but steady march towards majority rule had begun. Fueled by a desire for change and a thirst for justice, the black majority started to challenge the status quo. The political landscape was shifting, setting the stage for a dramatic transformation. The era of Rhodesia was drawing to a close, and a new chapter was about to unfold. As the 1970s dawned, the winds of change began to blow, setting the stage for a seismic shift in the nation's history. The decade of the 1970s witnessed a crescendo of conflict and negotiation. As the decade unfolded, the Smith government of Rhodesia found itself locked in an escalating guerrilla warfare with nationalist groups ZANU and ZAPU. Both groups, despite their ideological differences, shared a common goal: the end of white minority rule in Rhodesia. The guerrilla warfare was not simply a domestic conflict. It was a struggle that drew the attention of the international community, particularly the African nations who were sympathetic to the cause of ZANU and ZAPU. This international attention, coupled with economic sanctions, increased the pressure on the Smith government to negotiate a political settlement. In response, the Smith government initiated a series of internal settlements in the mid-70s. These settlements aimed to gradually transition power to the black majority while maintaining significant political and economic power in the hands of the white minority. However, these internal settlements were largely unsuccessful. They were rejected by the majority of the black population and dismissed by the international community as mere window dressing. The failure of the internal settlements and the continued escalation of the guerrilla warfare led to the intervention of international actors. The British government, under the leadership of Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher, played a significant role in brokering what came to be known as the Lancaster House Conference in 1979. The Lancaster House Conference was a pivotal moment in the history of Rhodesia. It brought together the warring parties under one roof and set the stage for a negotiated settlement. The conference was a tense and complex negotiation process, marked by disagreements, threats of walkouts, and backroom deals. But in the end, it yielded the Lancaster House Agreement, a comprehensive political settlement that paved the way for the transition to majority rule. The Lancaster House Agreement in 1979 marked the end of an era and the dawn of a new one. It signaled the end of white minority rule in Rhodesia and the beginning of a new chapter as Zimbabwe. The road to Lancaster House was long and fraught with challenges, but it was a journey that ultimately led to the birth of a new nation. With the Lancaster House Agreement, the stage was set for a transition. This pivotal moment in history marked the end of Rhodesia's unilateral declaration of independence and the beginning of a new era. As part of the agreement, the country briefly returned to British rule, marking a significant shift in power dynamics. The transition period, though short, was packed with significant events. One of the pivotal moments was the conducting of free elections in early 1980, overseen by the British. The elections, the first of their kind, were open to everyone irrespective of race or ethnicity. This was a major step in the right direction, ensuring that the voice of every citizen was heard and that the future of the country would be decided by its people. The elections saw the emergence of Robert Mugabe, the leader of the Zimbabwe African National Union Patriotic Front, as the Prime Minister. Mugabe's rise to power was a turning point in the history of the nation. His leadership would go on to shape the country in the years to come, for better or for worse. Along with the political changes, there was also a symbolic transformation. The country, once known as Rhodesia, shed its colonial name. It was time for a fresh start, a new identity that represented the country's aspirations and its people's hopes. And so, the name Zimbabwe was chosen. It was derived from the Shona term Zimbabwe, meaning House of Stones. This name not only acknowledged the country's rich cultural heritage, but also signified its resilience and strength. The transition was not without its challenges. There were tensions, uncertainties and fears. But through these trials, a new nation was emerging, ready to take its place on the world stage. On April 18, 1980, the Republic of Zimbabwe was born, heralding a new chapter. The journey from Rhodesia to Zimbabwe was a testament to the resilience of its people and their unwavering pursuit of freedom, justice and equality. The birth of Zimbabwe was a momentous event, but the transition was not without its challenges. As the confetti settled and the cheers subsided, the newly formed nation found itself grappling with a myriad of post-transition challenges. Economic struggles were at the forefront. The new government inherited a nation with a dual economy. A small, developed sector was juxtaposed against a large, underdeveloped one. This disparity was a legacy of colonial rule, and rectifying it became a Herculean task. The state embarked on an ambitious economic restructuring, but the journey was fraught with pitfalls and setbacks. Political tension was another significant challenge. The nascent democracy was marked by factionalism and power struggles. The most notable of these was the conflict between the Zimbabwe African National Union and the Zimbabwe African People's Union, two political entities with divergent ideologies and visions for the future of Zimbabwe. This tension escalated into violence with the Gukurahundi massacres, a dark chapter in Zimbabwe's history. Between 1983 and 1987, thousands of Ndebele people, perceived as political dissidents, were killed in a brutal crackdown by the country's army. This event cast a long shadow over the nation and remains a contentious issue to this day. And at the center of it all was Robert Mugabe. His consolidation of power was pivotal in shaping Zimbabwe's trajectory. Initially hailed as a liberator, his leadership evolved into an autocracy characterized by human rights abuses, economic mismanagement, and a disregard for democratic norms. Mugabe's rule, which lasted for nearly 4 decades, had a profound impact on the country and its people, influencing its course long after the transition. The transition from Rhodesia to Zimbabwe was a complex and multifaceted process. The euphoria of independence soon gave way to the harsh realities of nation-building, and while the country has made strides in certain areas, the challenges and consequences of this transition are still keenly felt. The birth of Zimbabwe was indeed a momentous event, but the journey that followed was, and continues to be, a testament to the complexities of forging a nation's identity. The transition from Rhodesia to Zimbabwe was a complex and multifaceted process, the effects of which still reverberate today. The journey from Rhodesia to Zimbabwe was marked by conflict, negotiation and transformation. This voyage through time began with the establishment of Rhodesia, a state born from the ambitions of British imperialists. The proclamation of its Unilateral Declaration of Independence, or UDI, sparked a whirlwind of global controversy, as the world watched a nation assert its sovereignty in defiance of international norms. Rhodesia's UDI was not just a political assertion, but a catalyst for a long and grueling guerrilla warfare. The African nationalists, determined to end the minority rule, waged a relentless struggle. This battle was not confined to the borders of Rhodesia. It spilled over into the international arena, where negotiations were as fierce as the warfare. The world powers, each with their distinct interests and agendas, were drawn into the fray, shaping the trajectory of this conflict. The Lancaster House Agreement was a pivotal moment in this journey. It was here that the warring factions, under the watchful eyes of the international community, agreed to a ceasefire and a roadmap to majority rule. The negotiations were fraught with tension, but ultimately they paved the way for a new era. Rhodesia was on the brink of becoming Zimbabwe. But the journey didn't end there. The transition process was a test of the nation's resilience. The new government had to navigate a minefield of challenges, from integrating the armed forces to managing the economy. The journey was fraught with trials, but each hurdle surmounted brought the nation closer to its new identity. And then there were the post-transition challenges. The new Zimbabwe had to grapple with the legacies of its past, from land redistribution issues to ethnic tensions. Each challenge was a reminder of the complex journey from Rhodesia to Zimbabwe. As we delve into the annals of history, we see the intricate tapestry of events that formed the nation we know today as Zimbabwe.